Hello everybody. So I made a video about how I do my cutting to get these pieces, but I wanted to show you what I do to get this image onto here before I get to that cutting process. So a couple tools that I'm going to use. I've got my scratch awl here, I've got my swivel knife here, and then I've got my pattern blanks. These are the ones that I had already cut out. I'm just going to reuse them because I need to do a duplicate for a second set that I'm making. I've already cut this big piece off of my roll. As you can see, it's kind of bent and rounded a little bit. If I wanted, I could spray this down just to get it to lay a little bit flatter, but it's not too bad, so I'm just going to work with it the way it is. So I will position this on here. I always like to see how many pieces I can get at once. See if I can use most of this at one time without having to waste or cut up another piece of leather. Looks like I will be able to get this to fit on here, so I am going to just take my scratch awl, take the lid off. Like I said before, safety is a big deal for me, so I always keep the little rubber cap on. And then once I've got it on here, I'm just going to lightly press around the edge, just tracing it with my scratch awl. This will be enough to get an impression onto the leather below, and then I'll be able to go over it with my swivel knife to get that primary impression I was talking about before. If you didn't get a chance, definitely take a look at that other video, or if you want a true timeline, head on over there after you watch this one. Now, just like you would do when you were tracing for, art class or anything like that, where you're tracing your hand, pay attention to how your pencil, or in this case our awl, is pointing so that you don't end up with an off-kilter line. You want to keep it as close to that original line from your pattern as possible. And after I pull it off of there, I do like to go back and just check to see if there are any bits or bobs that need to be filled in. And just like that, I've got a pattern imprinted on my leather that's enough for me to continue to work. I don't know if you can really see it on there. It's very faint, but it's enough that I can see it. I know where to put my swivel knife when I go through to do my actual cutting. So now I will use those lines as a guide. I'm going to position my other piece here. Trying to get it as close to that line as possible so that when I go to cut it, I'm not wasting anything. But I also want to have a little bit of give, so if it goes a little wonky, it's manageable. Okay, so I'm satisfied with that position. I'm going to start with this line that's closest to the other bit that I already marked, because that's going to be the most finicky. I want to make sure that my lines don't end up overlapping over on that end. The rest of this I've got a pretty good leeway all the way around, so I don't have to worry about it too much. And same thing as I did before, as I'm going around, I'm making sure that the angle of my awl is not too far off so that I get good and close to that template that I'm using. Usually I'd use like a piece of paper or some cardstock, something that I've got that pattern drawn up on, but since I'm making an identical for pieces I already cut out, I'm just going to use them again. It's nice and thick, it's not too strange of a shape, so I can just use that again. And same thing as before, I'm going to go back through, just fill in any gaps can tell on this one I did get a little off in my angle when I came around this corner. So I'll just go back through and make sure it matches up nicely, so when I use my swivel knife on it, that'll be well defined. Doesn't look like I cut in too far to any bits on here, so that'll be nice and easy. Even if I did when it's at this stage, I intend to tool this leather, and I can hide a lot of the mistakes that I might have made in that process. So now that I've got the impression on here, I'll show you this one too. Now that I've got my impression on here, I'm going to take my swivel knife, take that cap off. I did sharpen this after I did my last little video, so it's quite sharp. I'm going to go through, trace over these lines that I just made with my scratch awl, and then I'll be able to go on to my next step, which you saw before, where I push in a lot deeper with my swivel knife to get a good impression, and then I'll go through with my razor blade or another sharp blade to get that cut out entirely. Like I said, I did film that already in another video, so if you haven't watched it yet, that's available on my YouTube channel. It's also on IGTV, so if you want to jump on over there after you check this out, definitely give it a watch. Especially if you have any interest in what the start to finish process looks like. Just like I did before, I'm just going to go over these lines with my swivel knife, start to get that impression deeper, start to cut the actual grain of the leather. As you can see already, it's already a lot more noticeable for this line. It's kind of a funny shape. We'll go this way. We'll say one bonus of using this technique. You use the swivel knife to start your impression. You get some extra practice in utilizing it, going around corners, anything like that. Practice is definitely a good thing to get. They say practice makes perfect, but I don't really think perfect is entirely attainable, so I always want to keep working at my craft until I get to good enough status, at least. I'll come over to this one. All I'm doing is tracing the line, so it doesn't matter too much which piece I do first, or if I get the one piece done entirely before I move over to the next one. This corner right here, I do want to be very mindful. So I only gave myself about 1/8 of an inch, a couple millimeters worth of allowance. The other thing I like about this swivel knife, if you've never worked with one before, the blade does turn quite easily. I can spin it just with my fingers. So this whole line, I never picked up my blade even one time. And I still managed to get that nice tight allowance, crisp and clear. I'll come over here and I'll pick up on this line. See, this bit's a little warped. When it comes down to it, this is going to lay flat the way I want it to. But for right now, it's just something that I kind of need to work around a little bit. If I thought that it was truly going to be a problem, I would not have laid my pattern out where I did. As I've mentioned before, I try not to be wasteful, so I will use as much of this hide as possible. Even if it has a little bit of character. I think something like this, I don't know if you can see, it does have a couple wrinkles in it already just from being rolled up. Like I said before, I purchased this hide a couple years ago, and it's just been hanging out on a shelf. I've slowly been getting back into doing my leather working the way that I like to. And through that aging process of hanging out on my shelf, it's gotten a little dry. It's also developed some wrinkles from where it was rolled. Those will really come out in my finishing process when this whole thing is done. And I honestly look forward to that. You know, leather goods have a lot of character, especially as they age and patina over time. And that little bit of character in there from just being rolled up and getting a couple wrinkles, well, it's gonna look really beautiful when it's all done, I think. I've got this one line left over here right along this edge. Be really careful with this so it doesn't veer off. Give myself a very small allowance here on this edge, but looks like it's working out pretty well. There we go. Just like that. That's all it takes to get that first set done. I'll put my cap on my swivel knife, set that over to the side, and then give you a quick look. You can see just going through it like I did. I've got a good solid impression on here. You can even see it from far away. So now when I go back through this, I'll take my swivel knife again. I'll push really good, nice and hard on this to get a deep, deep impression. And then I'll take my craft knife and I'll go over it again and cut all the way through. And I'll have two pieces identical to these. And like I said yesterday, I'll go back through, I'll clean this up, and then we'll be moving on to the next step. Once again, go ahead and comment if you think you know what I'm making. Extra points might be setting up a giveaway if we reach 100 followers. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and happy Friday.